Hey, all, Matt Stockton here. I'm going to give you a quick overview of how I use Claude Sonnet to build a economic dashboard that allows you to see stock prices of stocks in the S&P 500 and compare that to some economic indicators. So here is the code that Claude helped me generate. This is all code that it wrote. I didn't really write anything at all. And this was through a couple iterations of kind of working with it and getting some feedback and giving it some guidance, and ending up with a pretty cool dashboard. Not anything that's super complex, but definitely something that you could take and use and build off of if you wanted to. So this is the code, and I'll just give a quick demo of the application, and we can kind of work backwards and see what I learned about using Claude. So I'm going to build the Docker image here and run this thing locally and pop open a browser, and it is a running application. So it's using Streamlit, and it's primarily using, I think, the Y Finance API and the Fred API. But what you can do is you can come in here and select any stock in the S&P 500. It will show that stock's price over time compared to a sector ETF for that stock, and we'll show you the raw data, kind of the open, high, low, close stock prices of the stock itself and the ETF. And then the cool thing is that you can, both choose other stocks to show, and you can also choose some economic indicators. So these economic indicators are data that's pulled from the Fred API. So for instance, we wanted to pop in CPI and see the rate of change of CPI year over year and have that in the same graph. We can show that here. And that will also show an individual line chart that shows the CPI value over time. And you can actually come in and add, a couple of these different economic indicators at the same time, to see them at the same time. So not super complex, but also non-trivial, especially since this is something that I just used prompting to build. And you could easily imagine taking this and building something a bit more elaborate. It's a great kind of building block to have an application like this. If you wanted to kind of customize it and build something more complex, you could work with Claude to do that. But you have something to start with. So pretty cool. And so how do we actually go about building this? Well, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to pop open Claude, and we'll just kind of look at one of my conversations here, the main one I think that I use. The prompt that I gave it was pretty straightforward. I basically just said, hey, I want to build a web application. I want you to use Python and Streamlit. I want you to use, the top 50 publicly traded companies. I want you to download this Fred data, specifically GDP and CPI. And I also want you to propose some other metrics I could use from the Fred data set. I also asked it to ask me any questions it had before it started, and this proved to be pretty valuable. It asked some really good questions about what I was actually looking for. It didn't require like an elaborate response for any of these, but they were pretty good questions. Things like, how do you want the percentage change to be displayed, or how do you want to handle mismatches in data frequency? What libraries do you actually want to use? So that was really helpful to say, all right, these are the things ask me questions, and then I will give you some more guidance. And yeah, so even with this initial prompt, it was able to give me a working application with a Docker file, and I could run this locally. So, writing this prompt to actually running the baseline of this application was 2 minutes to get something spun up. And from there, it was pretty nice to kind of talk through, some basic errors. Like I gave it a stack trace for a library incompatibility and was able to fix that up. I was having a bit of trouble getting the economic indicators to display on the line chart. Basically just sent it a screenshot and said, hey, this isn't working. Can you try to fix it? And it did a really good job at both building succinct and clear code, but also kind of walking me through what it did in each of these things. So super, super nice. And the kind of the user experience is really nice here too, because you can kind of come in and see the code it wrote. Like when it generates the stuff, it'll generate it out. You can see it kind of typing away. Then you can just like copy this code and paste it into your editor and run it. So really, really cool, well thought out user experience. So let's try something just to maybe do a little bit of a live demo here. Let's try to start a new chat. I'm going to try to take the application we built and give it back to Claude and ask it to make some modifications. I'm going to ask it to try to change the style of it and see if it can kind of make it a different style. So just, right now we kind of have this, a bit plain looking. Maybe we can kind of spice it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in here and say, you have built me a Python Streamlit dashboard app. I am attaching the code here. I would like you to change the styling of the dashboard and make it more enterprisey. I don't even know what that really means, but we'll see where it takes it. I would also like you to regenerate the entire app.py, not just the diff. I had a couple issues in the past where it was just doing the diff, so it was a bit harder to kind of just like copy and paste the new code. But we'll just ask it to do the whole code this time. And let's see what it does. Okay, it says it's going to do it. It always says, certainly I'll do something, which is kind of nice. It gives you a little bit of a boost. It never says, no, I can't do that, as far as I've seen. So it looks like here it is, adding some markdown styling in line, and then, probably just taking the existing code and putting it in there and kind of mixing in these new styles. And of course you could do something more elaborate. Like I could say, hey, like I want you to add a correlation analysis between the macro indicators and the stock. And it would try to do that. So it's not just like, hey, you can just do CSS or something. And one of the nice things I've found about how it works is not only does it kind of write the code for you, it also walks you through what it changes. So you can kind of say, hey, what did I do here? So if you're using this to understand exactly what it did and then, iterate on it, this is a really nice feature too. It gives you the code separate from what it actually did. So I'm going to copy this and let's see if this actually works. I'm going to paste this in here, save it, and come in here and rebuild the Docker image. I had asked it to create the Docker file, and it's definitely working. I think it could be optimized. I think it kind of rebuilds all these the pip layer or whatever. So it takes a bit more time than it should if I'm just making like app.py changes, but that's fine. So let's let it do its thing here. All right, and let's run it. See what it did. Let's pop back into our app, reload it. Wow, okay. Well, that's interesting. So it tried to do something, and it looks like it didn't do a great job of getting things very visible. But that's all right. Let's try this now. Let's say, hey, let me save this under image. And let's come back to Claude and say, thanks, but the styling looks off. I can't really see the text. Can you try again? Let's see what it does. I am attaching an image of what it looks like. Okay, it apologizes, which it seems to do a lot if you say, hey, this didn't work, but it will certainly try something new. And this is actually the first time I've tried to use it for like styling. Up until now, I've been mostly using it for kind of writing Python, pandas, Streamlits, some PyTorch stuff. Um, so it tells you what it did. It made some improvements, adjusted the background color. Okay. Oh, I noticed. See here, it says this code remains the same. This is kind of where I ran into problems before. Can you please regenerate the entire code, not just the diff? Okay, let's see what it does here. Okay, looks like it has a bunch of different things being added to the Streamlit components now. Let's copy that. Pop in here. All right. Again, this is probably one area where I could make some improvements is, hey, the Docker file could be better here. It doesn't really have to do this stuff every time. Okay, let's run it, see what happens. Oh, cool. Look at that. So it figured it out. And let's just play around here. So I don't know if it's more enterprisey, but it's definitely different. I kind of like it a little bit better. And the raw data is kind of off in this little, hidden area now, which is kind of neat. And let's see if we add like CPI here. Okay, cool. Look at that. CPI. Let's add the unemployment rate. Okay, so the scales are a little bit different for those two. It makes it a little bit odd, but consumer sentiment, let's add that. Wow, cool. So anyways, it's really cool. Like you can take this and really, use it or build something off of it. And I literally didn't make any of the code changes myself. I was just working with Claude, kind of looking at the code it was building, providing some feedback, and running this application locally. And I think about how I could use this, and it'd save a ton of time if I'm just trying to get something off the ground. And so I encourage everyone to kind of check it out and see how it can be useful, and would love to hear from you how you're using it, or if you need help using it. And I will post this code on my site, the GitHub repo, and feel free to reach out if you have any comments, questions, or feedback. Thanks.